So this is the Unit 3 test review for Algebra 1, and I'll go through each question and form this answer key. So for the first question, it says describe the vertical translation of the graph of f of x equals x to get the graph of g of x equals x minus 6. So first thing you want to be thinking about there is think of like y equals mx plus b. Technically, the way it's been written right here, f of x equals x is like your parent function. And so we need to ask ourselves what changed from here, from the original, to what we need to get to. And so only new part of that is that minus 6. So we need to get rid of, or we need to ask ourselves, what would the minus 6 do in terms of a vertical translation? So vertical means up and down, and that's exactly what B does. Since it's a minus, we would move down 6. So we would translate, is the mathematical word for that, translate down 6, or you can just say down 6. Right, and again, depending on the question on the test, it could be multiple choice, it could be short answer. So if it's multiple choice, you're just looking for the one that says this. If it's short answer, you could write it depending on how they write their answers. The next one says to find the x and the y intercepts of this equation, negative x plus 2y equals 10. And so to find each one, we're going to start with the x-intercept first. X-intercept means put 0 in for y. So when y equals 0, let's see what happens to x. So looking at my equation, I keep the first part the same. Negative x plus 2 times 0 equals 10. Okay, so that's our equation so far. 2 times 0 is just 0. So I have negative x equals 10 so far because 2 times 0 disappeared. Now negative x is not completely done there. I need to get x all by itself. I don't want negative in front of it, so I divide by a negative 1. Or you could just remove its sign and put it on the other side, which is the same thing as saying x equals negative 10. And then it's better to write this as ordered pair. I don't know that Michigan Virtual does that, so depending on how they've written their answer, it's going to be one or the other, either negative 10 or negative 10 comma 0 is the x-intercept. Now we're doing the same thing, but for the y-intercept, I'll actually do this in a different color. So for the y-intercept, I want to substitute 0 in, so it's when x is 0. So put 0 in for x. So this would be negative 0 plus 2 times y equals 10. So 2y is equal to 10 because the 0 does nothing. There's no such thing even as a negative 0. It's just going to be like 0. And then to divide by 2 here because we're trying to get y alone on both sides. So we divide by 2, so we get y equals 5. And again, you could leave your answer like this depending on how Michigan Virtual, if it's a short answer. And then to write your ordered pair, if that's what you're writing, it's 0 comma 5 because we plug 0 in for x. So to find each one, you have to plug 0 in one at a time for whichever variable and find the other one. And so these will probably be two different questions. You won't have to do it all in one step, but if the first question you saw said find the x-intercept, here's what you would do. If the next one said find the y-intercept, that's what we would do. And we could even look at the graphs for those. All right, let's keep going. The next one says, write the equation that describes a line in slope-intercept form. Remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b form. And so it gives me my slope, which is also m, and it gives me a point. So I can write that as a point, x comma y. It doesn't tell me what b is. I have to find b. So here's what I know so far. Y equals 4x plus b. I don't know b, so I'm just going to leave it the letter b. Okay, and so to find b here, I have to substitute in my x and y from the point. Okay, so I have my point here. I'm going to actually highlight things as I go as well. So this point is important because we have to substitute that in for this x and y. Okay, so let's go ahead and write my new equation with negative 4 in for y, 2 in for x, and you're solving for b. So we have negative 4 equals 4 times 2 plus b. That is 8 plus b. And I don't want the 8 there. I want to subtract it to the other side because I'm trying to solve for b. So negative 4 minus 8 is a negative 12. So I found my b. But my final answer needs to be an equation, not just b. So I write my final answer as y equals, remember the slope was 4, and you put an x next to the slope, and then minus 12. That is the final answer, which again, depending on if you have to write in slope it's a short answer question versus a multiple choice on the test, we use both those pieces of info. All right, and if you have questions on any of these as we're going through it, just kind of start for yourself, and then you can come in the afternoon session and we can go over any of these, as many as you have questions on. All right, the next one is a table. Looking at the table, you're trying to determine the equation. So you look for the pattern here for the x's and for the y's. So for the x's, we're adding 1. For the y's, we're subtracting 4. So now to figure out the equation, remember it's in y equals mx plus b. So far what you found is the m is the change in y over the change in x. Remember, think rise over run. So I have to divide my change in y's, which is -4, by 1, which is my change in x, and that can be reduced to -4. So far, here's what I know. Y equals -4x. I still need my b here. And here's where you would come back to the table and you'd look at it and say, do I know what my y-intercept is? But unfortunately, I don't know. I want to know what happens at 0. It's not in the table. I need to find it. And to do that, I can use the same pattern that I was working with, kind of like subtracting 4. Now, when you go backwards, you're going to add 4. So -2 plus 4 would give me a +2. So you can use your calculator for this. -2 plus 4 is 2, and that's where we get this y-intercept from. So I found my y-intercept by going backwards. Same thing here though, in case you need to see where it came from. Instead of adding 1 as I went backwards, I subtracted 1 because 0 is a number that comes before 1, and that's how I got to 2. So if that's my y-intercept, I need to make sure that gets added into my equation. So it's y equals -4x plus 2. And that's it for number 4. Okay, let's try another one. And number 5 says, if f of x equals -6x plus 2, find f of x when x is -3. So this time you are substituting in this -3 here everywhere you see an x. So you're going to plug it in to the x. Okay, so we have f of -3. That's like the notation, the way we write it. -6 times -3 plus 2. And then you just need to grab a calculator if you need it. -6 times -3 is 18, plus 2 would be 20. And then you just write that as your answer. Again, if it was short answer or if it was a multiple choice, you'd look for that correct answer. Okay, number 6 says to find the slope of the line. Remember, slope, in order to find it, we would need to know, it would have to be put into y equals mx plus b form. This right now is written in standard form. I want to get it to slope-intercept form so I can see my m. That's my slope. It's hard to, you can't really see the standard form. From standard form, you can't really see the slope. So we're going to start by subtracting x from both sides so that you're getting your y alone. Then we have -x minus 10 so far. Then we're dividing by -5 everywhere on the right side and the left. So it cancels out on the left. And you have y equals, so far. And then we have -x over -5. You can think of it as like a -1x. The two negatives make a positive. So this is 1/5. And the x can either be on the top of the fraction or right next to it. And then -10 divided by -5 is +2. This is how I would write my answer, but the final answer says find the slope of the line, right? So if we're trying to find slope, I need to grab this 1/5. So my m, or my slope, is 1/5. Just put that in parentheses. This is the final answer. The slope, the equation just helped me to get to that final answer, but I did need to write my final answer as the slope. Okay, and then the next question, same idea. It says, what's the slope? It's hard to see these points. I'm going to rewrite them right under. There it is. So the points are 4, 2, and 8, 7. So let's go ahead and write the slope formula. So if you, first of all, I'm going to write the slope formula off to the side here. It's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Make sure you use that when you take your quiz or the test, you should have it out, kind of have this review out as you're trying questions out. They're all very similar. And then you're substituting in the numbers. So it doesn't matter which one is x1, y1 versus x2, y2. Just make sure the first ones are x's and the second ones are y's. And I picked the first as 1s and then the second as 2s. So now we're going to go ahead and substitute in. 7 is y2, so I'll start with 7 minus 2 is y1, and 8 minus 4 are the x's in the same order, x2 minus x1. And then this simplifies to 5 over 4, and that's as far as we can go. Can't reduce that any further. You can leave it like that, or you could write it as a decimal, but if the question doesn't, you have to just make sure you follow any direction that the question says so that it grades it properly. I do go back in and check in case you may have done it incorrectly though. All right, we're going to keep going and try some more out. So the next question, number 8, says write an equation in slope-intercept form. Remember, that's y equals mx plus b form. For the line parallel, that's a key word here, I'm going to highlight that, to y equals 2x minus 2. So the only thing we're going to get from this line is the slope. Because hopefully you remember that parallel means same slope. So the two lines that are parallel are going to have the same slope. So if this one is 2, now my new slope also has to be a 2. So here's what I know so far. Y equals 2x plus b. I don't know b yet, but I do know a point that passes through that line. So I have my x and my y, the 6 comma negative 2. So let's go ahead and plug those in for x and y. So negative 2 is equal to 2 times 6 plus b. And then you're trying to solve for b. So we have 12 plus b equals negative 2. Subtract 12. And b equals negative 14. So that's just my b. I'm almost done here. I just need to write the equation in the form y equals mx plus b. So it'd be y equals 2x, because remember, same slope as the one that we had. And then now my b I just found is negative 14. This is the final answer. So you have to make sure you walk through the steps yourself, make sure you're plugging the numbers in the right spot. Don't mix up x and a y, that's a common mistake, but making sure x goes in for x, y goes in for y, and then just keep solving till you find b. Here's another one, except this one says point slope form. That's the key words here. Slope is given as 7, and a point is given also. So when you do point slope form, first of all, here's what point slope form looks like. It's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And the x1 and y1 are any point that are on the line. So for us, for number 9, it tells us this point. So that's my x1 and y1. So I can plug those numbers right in. That's all we're doing here, just kind of plugging in, substituting in, and you're done. This is though y minus a negative 3, because the y1 is a negative 3, equals the m slope is 7. And then x minus 2. Now you would simplify this just a little bit because we don't leave two negatives like that. You would write your final answer as y plus 3 equals 7 times x minus 2. This is now in point slope form, and we're done. Okay, let's try another one out. The graph of f of x equals 3x is reflected across the x-axis. So this is the key words here, reflected across the x-axis. We only did those reflections. Write a function g of x to describe the new graph. So we talked about how when something is reflected, it's going to change its slope because now it flips over to the negative side. So now my slope has to change to a negative. But everything else stays the same. Still the same a value or m value, like the rate of change is still going to have change by 3, but it's now negative 3. And then no b value since there was none there. So that doesn't change. So it just stays the same except for one little negative right in front. That's it. Okay, here's the next one. Writing this equation in slope-intercept form, you're trying to get y all by itself in order for it to be into y equals mx plus b. So we start by subtracting 12x. Negative 2y is equal to negative 12x minus 10. Divide them by negative 2. And then you end up with y equals 6x plus 5. because negative 12 divided by negative 2 would give me 6. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 would give me 5. And that's how you would leave your final answer. So you always move over the x to the other side, whatever number times x you have, then divide by whatever's still left in front of the y. And just use a calculator if you need it to help you divide. All right, here's the last one on this page. Tara creates a budget for her weekly expenses, and the graph shows how much money is in the account at different times. Find the slope of the line. So finding the slope of this line, anytime you have a graph and you're trying to find slope, you're just going to use rise over run. Okay, so we're going to look at this point here and going to rise. It's specifically dropping down a certain amount, and then it's going across a certain amount. So to figure out how much, you have to use their coordinates. And let me zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. This is 2400 for the y value, and then it goes down to 2000 for this y value. So to figure out how much it's decreasing, you count from 2400 to 2000, which would be negative 400. Okay, so it's decreasing, and since it's dropping down, that's why it's a negative. Then to go to the right, you're going from 4 to 12. So from 4 to 12, that's 8 spaces, right? And you can even look at it down here. There's 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you would count how many spots there are from 4 to 12 there. That's 8. Okay, and then to find the slope, we always do rise over run. So negative 400 divided by 8. And you can write the answer as, you just divide the two numbers and you can write your answer that way. So negative 400 divided by 8 would be a negative 50. In terms of like the context here, if we're looking at the units, it says this is time and amount of money. So it's basically saying that you're going to decrease by $50 per week is kind of the way that we can write this in context, but it didn't say that. But if it was to, that's what it would be. All right, we have one more page here to finish up. Just a few more questions. So the next part is dealing with direct variation. So we talked about how direct variation looks like this. Y equals a number times x. It's kind of like y equals mx plus b, where the origin is 0, 0, right? The b value or the y-intercept has to be 0, 0. We're passing through the origin. So what we're going to do in these examples is solve for y. When you have it in y equals form, if it looks like this, it's direct variation. It could be any number for a, but if it doesn't look like this, then no, it's not going to be direct variation. So let's start off by adding x. So just like we did 2 problems ago when we were putting it into slope-intercept form, that's exactly what we're doing here. So we're just going to see, is it slope-intercept form, like y equals mx plus b? Is there a b or not? So first thing I have here is added the x, so I got 4y equals x minus 4. Then I want to divide everything by 4. So y equals 1/4 x minus 1. When I look at that, I haven't answered the question yet. It says tell whether the equation represents a direct variation. If it was just 1/4 x, yes, it would have been. But because of this little minus 1 right here, that's why the answer here is no. It is not direct variation because it can't have this little -1 piece, anything added or subtracted, just like this equation. It's just y equals a times x. All right, and then this last one is almost in y equals mx plus b form, or I'm sorry, y equals ax form. Let's see what happens when I divide by 4, because I'm trying to get the y all by itself. So when I look at it like this is technically y equals a times x, but I could write it as y equals 1/4, like put a 1 in front there, 1/4 x, and that's a little bit easier to see that a is 1/4, and then there's no b. The b value is 0, 0. So this one is a yes. So this one does work for direct variation. It is represents direct variation, whereas this one does not, because it can't have extra. It can't have a b value. It can only be b can only be 0 for direct variation. All right, we have 2 more to finish up with, and number 14 is actually probably one of the easier ones. To write an equation of a line that has this slope, -2, and this y-intercept 10, you literally just plug the numbers right in. Remember, m is the slope and b is your y-intercept. So to write in y equals mx plus b form, you would have y equals negative 2x plus 10. And that's it. And then finally, to graph absolute value, what we finished up with last week, the last section of Unit 3 was 3.12, dealing with absolute value. We know that when we graph this, we could use a graphing calculator to help, but we don't need to. All you're going to do is figure out what is the vertex. And it does say label the axis of symmetry in the vertex and find the x-intercepts. So first of all, because that's how Michigan Virtual kind of walked through it. So first of all, the vertex is at 4, 0, because the number, you always take the opposite of the thing inside the bars, so -4 turns into a +4, and then there's no k value here at the end. There's no number telling it how to go up or down. So I'm going to put a dot at 4, 0. That's my vertex. Then I can find I can find the y-intercept so that I can like draw out the rest of this curve. I do know though I can also go up 1, right 1, and up 1, left 1, since the a value is just 1. The first part is like using my slope, and then you can keep doing that until you eventually end up on the y-axis. So I could do it there, here, here. Just kind of keep going up 1, right 1, and up 1, left 1. I ran out of room on the right, but if I go up 1 more time, up 1 and left 1, I do land on 0, 4 for my y-intercept, and my x-intercept, remember, was 4, 0. It also says to label the axis of symmetry, which would be a vertical line. So it would look like this, x equals 0. It's going to just go straight down. So the final answer on Michigan Virtuals, on the test when you take it, is going to be a graph. It's all multiple choice. You're looking for which graph looks like this. So it'd have to be at 4, 0, 0, 4, and then it has to have this little dashed line for the AOS. This is our axis of symmetry, is abbreviated AOS. So we have our x-intercept and y-intercept. The x-intercept happens to be the same as the vertex, and then you have the AOS drawn. So that's all we're doing here for number 15. I think it mentions on the question that you should include domain and range as well. It doesn't actually have that in the answers, so you don't have to do anything with domain and range. Okay, and then this is it. This will be posted also on the website, on the teacher feed, so you can also just look at the answer key as needed. And if you have questions, please comment.